Autism from a completely different angle. The truth behind the symptoms. According to the theory of evolution of consciousness, TEC, autism is neither a neurological disorder nor a biological defect. It is not caused by brain damage, but rather represents a specific psychic configuration, a state of stagnation of consciousness in the second phase of its development. This is a phase in which the ego already possesses the capacity to control the various parts of the psyche, but instead of identifying with an external role model that would lead it forward, the ego identifies with the emotional part of the psyche. Rather than using its function to establish hierarchy and integration, the ego places itself and all other parts of the psyche in service of emotional stability, which becomes the dominant value within the inner system. In such a configuration, the ego does not orient toward development, because all of its energy is directed inward, toward preserving emotional equilibrium by minimizing contact with the external world. Instead of seeking experiences that would help it grow, the ego maintains the current state through routine and isolation. Consciousness does not open to reality, but instead turns inward, circling in a closed emotional loop where any external stimulus is perceived as a potential threat. In this structure, the relational part is not entirely non-functional, but its activity is limited only to relationships that do not disturb the internal state, such as the relationship with the mother, or with people who do not cause emotional discomfort. The active, mental, and sensory parts are not blocked, but they do not serve the personality as a whole. Instead, they are directed toward preserving emotional stability through controlling behavior, thoughts, perception, and physical interaction. Every external experience, people, new situations, unexpected words, is perceived as a potential source of emotional destabilization that cannot be processed. As a result, the system shuts down, and experiencing the other as a subjective consciousness becomes impossible. The other is no longer another version of myself, but an object that might disrupt inner order. This manifests as avoidance of social contact, not because the autistic person dislikes people, but because others are not perceived as true eyes. Language and communication have no function in such a closed system. There is no conscious other worth speaking to. Every change in routine is experienced as a risk of destabilizing the internal structure and is therefore avoided. External stimuli are not just unpleasant, they are overwhelming because they enter directly into the emotional system without a filter. There is also no room for empathy because, as in all states where the ego is turned inward, the other is not experienced as a subject, but as an object. TEC offers explanations for phenomena in autism that other theories cannot provide. For instance, why does this condition appear in early childhood without any visible trauma? Because the consciousness already enters this life with a pre-existing identification with the emotional part. It is not something that develops, but something carried over from a previous developmental cycle. Why can an autistic person have above-average intelligence? Because the brain is not damaged, and the mental part functions. But like all other parts of the psyche, it is placed in service of emotional balance, rather than communication or logical adaptation. Why are there deep emotions, but no relational capacity? Because the emotions are internal and do not depend on the other. In fact, the other can only disrupt that internal emotional balance. And why is there a resistance to hearing about other people's emotions? Because even those are experienced as a possible source of inner destabilization. At its core, autism is a condition in which the ego, instead of identifying with an external value structure and guiding the psyche toward development, remains closed and oriented toward maintaining internal order at all costs. It is not a disease, but a halted evolution of consciousness. Not because development is impossible, but because the entire personality structure is organized around avoiding anything that could disturb inner peace. And so, consciousness remains where it feels safest, but not where it feels most alive. If any of the terms or concepts mentioned in this video seemed unfamiliar, feel free to check out the playlist Tech, Theory of Evolution of Consciousness, where all phases, psychic parts, and foundational principles are clearly explained. If you'd like to continue watching content like this, subscribe to the channel. It's not just support, it's a way to stay connected with upcoming videos. And in the comments, you're welcome to share your thoughts or experiences, especially if this video helped you see autism from a different angle. See you in the next one.